Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to join you at the Sagarmathan, the Great Oceans Dialogue. Your gathering in Mumbai comes at a decisive moment for the world's oceans. Across global forums on the future of our planet, we hear questions of sustainability, stewardship, and strategic opportunity which place our blue oceans at the center of the global agenda. Today, the dialogue on our oceans is also a dialogue on connectivity between new materials, new markets, and new politics, where innovation, investment, and international law converge to shape the new frontier of sustainable development. For India, the oceans are not just geographical boundaries, but they're pathways of prosperity. With a coastline extending over 7,500 kilometers, an exclusive economic zone exceeding 2 million square kilometers, and centuries of maritime heritage, India's destiny is deeply tied to the health and governance of the seas. The blue economy has rightly been recognized as a new frontier of growth, one that integrates science, technology, and markets, encompassing traditional sectors such as shipping and fisheries, alongside emerging ones like renewable energy, biotechnology, and deep-sea resources exploration. Among these, deep-sea mining stands out. This is why India is investing in deep-sea capabilities. Through the Deep Ocean Mission, India is developing advanced underwater vehicles, submersibles, and sustainable extraction technologies linking innovation directly to environmental responsibility. These innovations are not only expanding India's technological frontiers, but are also redefining how states can align industrial progress with planetary health. Dear friends, just a month ago, India and the International Seabed Authority signed a new exploration contract in the Indian Ocean, the third under the ISA regime. This marks not only a milestone for India's deep-sea ambitions, but also a reaffirmation of strong support for ISA and the United Convention of the Law of the Sea, which provides the comprehensive legal framework for all ocean and maritime activities, while also promoting the peaceful use of the seas. UNCLOS and the ISA regime enshrine that the seabed, designated as the common heritage of humankind, must be managed collectively, responsibly, and foremost transparently. Therefore, we cannot speak of opportunity without also addressing responsibility. The deep sea is an ecosystem that we need to understand better. As custodian of the International Seabed Area, the International Seabed Authority must ensure that the race for minerals does not become a race to the bottom. Here, international cooperation is essential. India has been an active participant in shaping the forthcoming mining code at the ISA, and it continues to advocate for regulations that are science-based, environmentally sound, and equitable in the sharing of benefits. The blue economy of the future will depend on how effectively we bridge science, policy, and enterprise, ensuring that every technological leap is matched by an ethical one. The story of the ocean has always been a story of balance between the use and preservation, exploration and protection, sovereignty and solidarity. At Sagarmathan, let us reaffirm our shared commitment to write this story together, not as competitors, but as stewards. As India charts its course in the blue economy, the message is clear: to lead responsibly, to innovate sustainably, and to build markets that respect both the limit of our planet and the aspiration of its people. We must ensure that the treasures of our deep ocean serve not one state, but all of humankind, and not just this generation, but all generations to come. Thank you.
This takes us directly into one of the most interesting conversations that the world is having at the moment. If you see the headlines, everything is about rare earth and critical minerals. If you see policy making, it is all about rare earth and critical minerals. We are looking at several visits, several agreements between major powers, how they are shaping up the global engagements. It's quite clear that this is a topic in which we literally have to redraw the map from the very basics. Because if you were an observer of international politics even a few years back, you would not have understood the import of what rare earth and critical minerals bring to the table. Today, you can't be an observer and a student of international relations without understanding what is happening in this space. So I have a great panel today to discuss some of the obvious opportunities and challenges that exist. And I think the idea here is to talk about some of the geographies which are going to be critical in shaping up the policy conversation in this domain to bring to bear their thoughts and their approaches on this question. So let me begin by going to one of the regions which is at the heart of global economic dynamism, Africa. And let me invite Nancy from Kenya to perhaps explore and give us a sense of, as we look at the world economy and as we look at the global redistribution, economic redistribution that is happening around the global economic space, as Africa looks at the issue of critical minerals, as Africa looks at the issue of redrawing or changing the balance as it comes to extraction, processing, and distribution. How does it feel? Where does it feel it is situated at? Is it comfortably positioned? We know great power geopolitics, and we know the institutional challenges, regulatory challenges that come with it. But I think for a rising economy, for a growing economic power like Africa, this is going to be an important and interesting question right at the inception of some of the global economic developments that are happening. So how do you situate Africa in this debate?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying how honored I am to be part of this great conversation, especially as moderator has put it in the era that we are in. Africa holds 30% of the minerals that are critical to the green and digital transitions that we are looking at. But Africa's history has been one of extraction and export. So while the minerals are found all over Africa, starting with the south, then we go to the Central Africa, Eastern Africa, emerging regions with new discoveries, and then the West, the minerals are spread all over. But the history has been extraction and export of the raw minerals to the processing centers, most of them in the Far East. And when we look at the way the trade center, economic centers were organized, we find that the corridors, and now we're talking of 20 plus corridors, only looked mostly at the export base. And therefore we've got a large hinterland that is not integrated into the port system, and which is very, very important for when we are redrawing the new maps. Yes, we've got an opportunity now, a clean slate on which to reorganize how we look at those minerals reaching the markets. And we have an opportunity, therefore, to integrate the hinterland in terms of other modes of transport, not just looking at the ports as the main players. That's a silo way of looking at issues. We have to integrate the roads and the rail, plus of course the digital highways that make it very, very efficient for this. And now we've got the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, through which the AU is looking at a new framework, or has provided us with a new framework for looking at how we process these minerals, and bringing the processing areas back to Africa will really help, because first of all, it brings jobs to the people, a young and agile and restless population, because Africa is the youngest continent that we have. And therefore bringing processing back to the continent will help us in dealing with the economic unrest that we face sometimes because of young people feeling that they are not getting the space in which to, to grow their socio-economic fabric. And therefore, this is a new opportunity for us to do that. Now, when we look at bringing the processing back home, yes, the AfCFTA, we need to look at it as one big single market. It's going to be the single biggest free trade area in terms of the number of countries, the populations, and therefore it makes logical sense then to bring the processing back home where the minerals, such a large chunk of minerals, is found. But then we look at what we need to do, lots of work to do there, because we need to, first of all, like I said, develop the infrastructure that supports the integration. Then also, we look at the reasons. One of the reasons that we've not been able to set up processing is the energy deficit that makes it very expensive. But then the good story is we've got the resources to be able to do that. Solar power, hydropower, but it needs partnerships between governments and the private investors. So we have a lot of work to do, but it takes goodwill. And one of the things we can do is set up the regulatory space in order to de-risk investment and invite the private sector to play. Then, of course, is the integration of the corridors to bring not just to bring also the logistics to make them more efficient and take advantage of the new technologies that are emerging. I think that's a good start.
Thank you. I think that's a good sense of the optimism that perhaps inheres in Africa. And I think the point about bringing processing back home is also a very important one, given the imbalance in the global economy at the moment. And this brings me to Mats. Arctic is certainly opening up and is becoming such an important part of the conversation. There is certainly great potential there for critical minerals, but there is also, we know, great potential there for great power contestation. As we speak, it is happening, and as we speak, it is shaping the landscape, both in terms of the opportunities, but also in terms of the challenges. But I think if we just focus on the optimistic side of the equation at the moment, what does it mean when we say Arctic is opening up and there is enormous appetite and enormous interest from all stakeholders in what is happening there and how it will shape up? Are we seeing an infrastructure already being laid out, or is it a work in progress at the moment?
No, thank you. It's actually interesting. So India published an Arctic strategy in 2022. But the interest of India in the Arctic goes back more than 100 years. Then one of the thinkers, Tilak, wrote a paper where he described how the Aryans actually came from the Arctic region and settled in India. So the relationship between Arctic and India is more than 100 years old. More recently is with the Indian Arctic policy. And the reason for this is because you mentioned about the Arctic opening up. When the weather is changing in the Arctic, it affects the monsoon in India. You know, we are all interconnected in a global weather system. And the same when it comes to mineral supplies. We are all interconnected. We cannot, right now, you were giving in your introduction that we live in a more fragmented world right now, where everyone believes that they can have their own processing, their own mineral, the whole supply chain. And that's not the reality. You know, like minerals that one country would need is located in one place. The processing will be located in a third place, and the customers for these projects will be in a third place. So in many ways, we are interconnected, similar to weather systems. The Arctic region, very briefly for those of you that don't know, is actually completely opposite to the previous speaker. So we have an aging population and a very small population. 4 million people lives in the region only. And it's the 8 Arctic states of Russia, the US, the Nordic regions. We also have a lot of green energy, which is good in many ways. So the region, similar to what we heard from Africa, is extractive resources. Is fish, is energy, whether it's oil and gas or renewable, and then it's critical raw materials. But none of this is being processed in the Arctic region. And we are not really calling for it as well, because it's not realistic. It's a lot more realistic to get the mining materials from, let's say, Greenland and ship it, for example, to India for processing and actually for the construction, because that's what already, I mean, today China sits on 70% of the rare earth elements market. We know we have to diversify this, but we also know that most European countries don't want processing in their backyards. You know, like not in my backyard. It's not only for mining, but also for the processing. And also, it takes a lot of skills that I'm sure there's already in India this skill. So we need to transport something from the far north to the global south. And then we need to work together to make sure it becomes a win-win. And I think it's possible. And just finally here in the end, if you look at a map, you will see that for the first time in human history, a new ocean will open up. So that's the Central Arctic Ocean. That will mean that the world, as we know today, will change a lot. It means the Northern Sea route will change a lot. It means the Northwest Passage will change a lot, but also the Central Arctic Ocean. So if I was going to look into the future, I would look at weather patterns, but also how that affects business and supply chains. Thank you.
Excellent point. And I think the point about interconnectedness and how it's slightly dystopian in the way policy conversations are happening at the moment, because the siloed approach to many of these issues will perhaps also impose costs, which I'm not sure whether countries at the moment or in the future will be willing to pay those costs. But let me go to the third issue, the third region, the third geography, which is on the dais here, the Mediterranean. And we have seen Mediterranean has been part of this larger conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, in contrast to the Arctic, the Mediterranean has been open for thousands of years. The Mediterranean Sea was actually never a border. It was more like a strategic bridge between the East and the West, between Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. However, and in this global race for critical materials and supply chain resilience can still play a critical role, what many people do not know is that nevertheless the Mediterranean is one of the least integrated regions in the world. And that's because we have very fragmented markets, political mistrust. Don't forget that it's an area that includes the south of the European Union, the Balkans, Middle East, with all its chronic issues, and the north of Africa. Nevertheless, it is a region that always, it's in the heart of every discussion. Personally, I come from Greece. It's a country, it's a marine nation, a gateway to Europe. Recently has developed also into a logistics hub. And now we're also exploring some rare earth elements, lithium. We have also nickel and magnesium. So from a national perspective, I would say that we would like ideally to be both a source and a platform to connect rich resourced areas like in Africa with logistics hubs in the Middle East, India, of course, with its industrial base, and act as a gateway to the European Union. And coming to the European Union, because from the South European perspective, it plays a key role. Commission President von der Leyen sent a couple of days ago that we learned the hard way with energy security, and we don't have the luxury to do the same with critical materials. Let's hope that the European Union will have a different and a more coordinated response into this issue. It is optimistic that in the Critical Raw Materials Act of the European Union, we saw last June that 13 out of the 60 new strategic projects that were approved, 13 are outside the European Union, from Brazil to Malawi, from Kazakhstan to Zambia. But of course, that there more to be done when it comes to connectiveness. For the Mediterranean, India is a key partner. And the whole discussion about IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, is of key importance, even though challenges persist, even though developments in the Middle East do not make this scenario that easy. but also from a Greek, but also from a Mediterranean perspective, I would say that the connection between Middle East, between Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean is of key importance for us. Another issue I would like to mention is the strategic ports, investment in strategic ports. Ports, regardless of where they are, have always been a source of development, a source of growth, an opportunity both for the local populations, but also for the interconnectedness. So we see ports in Greece, in France, but in the Middle East, in Africa, a lot, in India, and we should do more to see how these ports remain connected. And last but not least, since we're talking about maritime corridors, yes, of course, we want new corridors, we want new routes, but we don't only want to go faster. We want to be also smarter and greener. So blue economy is definitely the new frontier. And even if the international discourse is going a bit far away right now from the green transition, from a Mediterranean perspective, green shipping, marine decarbonization, hydrogen production, smart ports investment are issues that should be in our discussion nevertheless.
Konstantinos, if I can just ask you one question around this idea of Mediterranean as a bridge. And this sense we have been hearing now very proactively by policymakers in the region, positioning Mediterranean as a bridge, as you also mentioned in your remarks. Now, is this a reaction to the kind of geopolitics that we are witnessing around the world, where fragmentation is becoming the norm, and therefore Mediterranean as a geography finds itself more vulnerable? Or is it a reflection of the economic opportunities that you feel remain untapped, and therefore Mediterranean has to do much more than before in order to tap those opportunities?
It's a very good question, and I think it's a mix of both things. First of all, yes, it is a reaction. It is a normal reaction. Because geopolitical realities does not allow us to do business as before, but it's something that lies also very much in the heart of Mediterranean nations. We were always explorers, like the Indian Ocean, and the Indian Ocean has been is someone that we met hundreds of years ago. I don't want to go into a very romantic presentation of history in the past, but nevertheless, we know that economic opportunities lie everywhere. And as I said in the beginning, not even the Mediterranean itself is integrated. So started from home, doing our homework, and then moving on in order to take the role of geography. And, as I said, we can easily connect the logistic hubs of the Middle East, the industrial base of India, rich resourced areas in Africa, and the processing hubs of Europe through through a natural gateway, the Mediterranean. So why not?
Let me invite Ms. Cynthia, Irene Cynthia, for her comments. Irene, if you can lay out for the audience here India's priorities in this sector, and perhaps how India is looking at its own port development through that lens. So both in terms of critical minerals as well as in terms of its policy priorities. A brief layout would be very helpful, I think, but also in some ways enter into this larger discussion of where India fits in this broader global architecture that is being constructed, as we have heard, from three specific geographies: Arctic, Africa, Mediterranean. So if we would like to have your thoughts on both the issues.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So we all know that critical minerals are going to be a part of our future. And of course, I think China has been the one who has realized the potential of this particular sector at least 10, 15 years back. Since 2020, India has been very focused on this particular sector. So we can see that they have listed out about 30 items which are critical minerals, of which we know that 5 to 6 minerals like copper, like silver, and a little bit of lithium, cobalt. All these are already available in India. Some are being mined, and some we are looking at prospective mining. Second is when we look at explorations and sourcing of materials, India has placed a very specific policy for that. We have also brought in Kabil, the Khanij Videsh Limited, which is looking at possible partnerships with other countries for exploration and sourcing. Now, these are all areas where I think India and other countries with similar interests can actually cooperate. Apart from this, we are also looking at intensively, as one of our speakers have put it, not in my backyard, but I think with the right kind of safety measures and SOPs in place, we should have the ability to refine them at our own spaces also, because self-reliance, as our honorable Prime Minister always puts it, it will not come from depending on a source which is outside. You will have to be self-dependent so that you are able to progress. And India, we know, is a huge consumer of all these critical minerals. So it is required for us. The second point, which I would like to again put forth, is how are we ready from the logistics point of view to be able to receive these minerals and utilize them for our requirements as well as for the requirements of the countries of the world. So because I'm from the port sector, so I can just make some points on that. We are fully compliant with all the IMDG codes. So we have classes of dangerous goods are classified in different classes, and you get specific certificates after you comply with all the requirements. So, for example, Kamarajar Port, except class 1 and class 7, we can handle all other kinds of items, either coming through containers or otherwise. Chennai Port is actually fully certified for all kinds of dangerous goods that can be handled. So these kind of SOPs are in place. I can list out lots of things. For example, when you receive a ship inside the port, you know that there has to be at least 48 hours of minimum intimation. Then all the steps that need to be taken in for how much period a particular cargo can be retained inside the port. And for some cargo, it will be 2 hours. For some cargo, it will be 12 hours. All these prescriptions and SOPs are in place. I think the main criteria will be to have these industries very close to the receiving point, the port. When you have it close by, your storage, your transportation, all this can be managed in a better way. And I think that also helps in reducing costs, in bringing up more efficiency. So these are points which India is working on, and our port sector is also has lots of these SOPs in place. And given this scenario, I think the major concern will be whether we are able to establish good partnerships where we trust each other, and then we proceed with this work that we have taken up. Thank you.
If I can come back to you on this very important point, last point that you made, and I think ultimately a lot of our conversations on economic matters, which is related matters, is now hinging on these trust-based partnerships.
True.
And you mentioned that as India develops its capabilities, as India builds its capabilities, those partnerships are going to be critical variable in enhancing those capabilities at the time and pace at which it is needed. Do you think from the challenges perspective and what is happening globally, where countries are, the global order is very fragmented, how do you think in terms of port development and port infrastructure that India is trying to develop, whether the present environment that India is part of or that the world is going through, that hampers or that hinders, or whether that is something that we just take it on our chin and move forward, because that's a given, that's very little at that level, at the policy level, one can do about it?
I think we have lots of bilateral and multilateral platforms. For example, we have the Mineral Security Partnership where India is a member. We have the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. All these are platforms which are available. Lots of conversations are going on. But then we also know that some partners are reliable and some partners are not. So I think ultimately countries with similar interests will have to sit together, will have to say that, yes, we trust each other on these particular items. And for example, somebody can support in logistics. And we're all intertwined in trade. When we say trade, it means that the ship belongs to someone, the source comes from a different country, it can be processed at a different country, and the demand comes from a different set of countries. So we're all intertwined. This realization, I think, will go a long way in stabilizing it. And I think it is very, very feasible to have a very stable partnership where we can actually source, process, and distribute these materials based on the world's demand.
So, Mats, this brings me to you because you also made a similar point about how this idea that we can have our siloed worldview is certainly not feasible over the long term. In the short to medium term, of course, everyone is adjusting to what is happening. So, I think if you can reflect on that issue and this issue of partnerships, that if you think from the perspective of Arctic, at one point, Arctic was seen as the harbinger of everything good. That look, nothing ever happens there. Countries have found a way of managing a very important geography. Today it is again very fragmented, very volatile, is getting militarized. In that context, when you think of critical minerals, when you think of alternative routes, how should we be looking at it conceptually? Because the challenge is that yes, in an ideal world we are interdependent, and we should. It's a win-win situation. It should be a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. But in reality, there is so much turbulence, so much volatility that you have to take that into account as you are building those partnerships. So how do we think about it and navigate this immediate turbulence that lies ahead of us, at least in the short to medium term?
No, it's an excellent point, because in the old days, if we go back in time, people tend to look at the Arctic region as a small snow globe that they could shake and look at, and it was isolated from the rest of the world, but is globally connected in many, many ways. And it's globally connected in the way that trading is related, but also that partnerships is needed. In the Arctic region, to go back to the previous point about trust, business happens at the speed of trust. And the moment, so you can do business very, very fast if you have trust. But the moment, as we see right now, that trust is breaking apart and everyone is running their own game, it becomes very, very difficult. And it also becomes not only difficult, but also expensive. And I think we have, like, this silo structure that we have right now is extremely expensive. It's expensive for companies and it's expensive for governments. Having said that, monopolies are also expensive. So this month we saw China pressuring with critical or rare earth elements because they sit on such a big majority of the market. That also makes it very expensive. So you need to find the right balance between having your own supply or diversified supply of critical raw materials and a monopoly. But you cannot say that every country needs to do their own mining. I mean, that has no way forward. And just to link it in, to go away outside the Arctic region, when you all woke up this morning, President Trump had signed a new agreement on rare earth elements with Japan. And this agreement, which is interesting in many aspects, is a counter to China, obviously. But what is interesting is that one of the paragraphs says, we need to work with international partners on the supply chain. So this is a bilateral agreement between two countries, exactly what we mentioned. The world is becoming a lot more of a bilateral agreement. But still, they recognize when it comes to supply chains, you need to look internationally, even when it's Trump making an agreement. I do think we have to recognize this aspect. I also do think we have to be careful, because this is the logic, what I'm explaining now, but that's not the reality of today. The reality of today, very briefly, is populism, polarization, post-truth. And this just means we have this fragmented. So what we have seen within the energy sector, for example, where a lot of oil and gas from the Russian Arctic has moved to Europe, has moved to Asia. Now there's being put pressure on that. We will see the same with critical raw materials, I'm sure. So we need to be prepared. As we heard from the previous speaker, the EU is already preparing, but it takes 17 years to open a new mine. Do we have 17 years to plan for the new mines, like with how the world is moving right now? I'm not so sure. So the conceptual framework is all up in the air at the moment. Thank you.
So this brings me to Nancy, because when we had started this conversation and you opened this up, you talked of all the opportunities that exist for Africa. I think now it's time to turn the gaze to the challenges, because I think we have been talking a lot about challenges. We have been talking a lot about how great power contestation is shaping some of these ideas, and will continue to impinge on Africa, even as Africa tries to think of bringing, say, extraction back home, or think of supply chains in ways that involves local markets. You talked about the African local market, domestic market as being huge. How do you then look at partnerships? How does Africa look at what are the set of challenges that you have, and B, what kind of partnerships you want to build in this sector with external stakeholders, so that it remains a sustained endeavor beyond just the domestic market?
Thank you very much for that very valid question, particularly in the context of the discussions that have emerged from this panel. Let me say that one of Africa's greatest challenges, which is also an opportunity, is integration of the market, because we've got 55 countries, 54 of them have signed into the AfCFTA, creating this one big market, but integration is still an issue, because we've got no harmonized standards. That's an opportunity, because between the countries, and that's the reason why very little intra-Africa trade takes place. And this is an opportunity now as we create new routes to take advantage of that. So harmonize the standards, make efficient our logistics, starting with the border crossings as we bring the minerals to the market. That's one of the issues that bogs down. And I hear my colleague on the left say that it's okay to mine or rather extract in one place and send for processing across the world. Yes, makes sense because of maybe developments in the area, but in Africa, the biggest problem is that interconnectivity that really bogs down the transportation. So make our logistics more efficient. That's one of the opportunities that we have. And then we can create cheaper and more accessible markets. How do we do that? Of course, using technology that's available now. We have an opportunity to do that. The digitalization is bringing in new opportunity, Internet of Things and blockchain to bring transparency as the goods travel these long distances. And of course, an opportunity then to bring ethical, extraction and all this dealing with whatever we are extracting from Africa. We had a case one time, just to bring it home, where in one of the ports, as loading was taking place, what had been declared was these containers carrying earth for it to be taken to a market to analyze. And of course, when the container fell into the ocean, the locals and the port people were like, of course, it's just earth. It's okay. But when the company exported machinery to retrieve that earth, that soil, then it raises questions. And therefore, when we have the use of technology, the new technologies coming in order to track and to bring transparency, then we are also bringing a whole new dimension into this whole process. Then the other opportunity we have, which is, I think, one of the biggest that we have in Africa, is being able to create the processing home and therefore industrializing without stressing the environment. We are not modifying. There's a clean page. There are no industries. So if we do it now with the knowledge we have, with the assets we have, with the technology we have globally, creating partnerships, like you said, because we may have the natural resources, but we don't have the technology. And of course, it's a win-win situation. And therefore, we will be able to industrialize and create new processing plants with no stress to the environment. And I think that's not something to be ignored. So logistics improvement, particularly the last mile connectivity with the ports, using technologies and standardizing, and also energy will be very, very important. Thank you.
I'll ask one last question to Konstantinos, but let me also invite now the audience for their questions. We can take 3 to 4 questions for our panelists. So please, please think about who wants to come in. And I think we have the microphones here on the 2 sides. If you want to stand up and join the queue, we'll take a few questions before we conclude. And let me ask the final question to Konstantinos. Konstantinos, we heard a range of issues, particularly specifically the challenges, both from Arctic, from India, and also from Africa. A lot of those challenges are being talked about in terms of how do we develop partnerships, how do we develop alternative routes, how do we develop logistics facilities. From a Mediterranean perspective, what are your specific challenges that you face at the moment?
I would say that first of all, the challenges are common. We may agree to disagree on some issues, but we live in an interconnected world. No man is an island, and the challenges are common and joint for all of us. From a Mediterranean perspective, well, actually, that's not only Mediterranean perspective. I would say that at the moment we lack some things. We lack money and we lack time. We lack money because all of these new trade routes, all these new corridors, they need massive investment, massive technological and financial investment. And we have the ideas, we know what to do, but at the end of the day, it's not clear who will pay the bill. And it's always the question when it comes also to multilateral agreements, when it comes to the United Nations, and we see what happens right now with funding, etc. Another thing is, as we said before, we lack the time because we don't have the luxury to discuss a lot at European Union level. It takes a lot of time to take decisions, and sometimes when you have a decision and you have a project on ground, maybe the reality is already different. To give you a brief example, when it comes to energy, because of the war in Ukraine and also geopolitical developments in Greece, for example, we invested a lot in LNG platforms, floating LNG platforms, which at this point, it's not clear at the end they will be useful, but we're not sure that we will be able to use in the amount that we were actually expecting. So it was an investment that it's not clear already 2 years later if it will be materialized. And then, of course, and I think it was said by all speakers, we lack trust. It's true that there are many agreements, bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements, but I'm not 100% sure, and I hope I'm wrong, that there is this level of trust between partners, even between European partners, even between partners of the same alliances, that will allow for these agreements to materialize. And it's a good opportunity. It's a good that we are all here today. And again, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for bringing all these different continents and areas of the world here, because at least we have the opportunity to sit on the same table with this great audience and discuss which are our priorities and which are also our concerns.
Thank you. I see that we have a series of questions here. If you can briefly introduce yourself and the question, please. If you're directing it to any specific speaker, please also mention that.
Okay, good morning. My name is Alves. I'm from Mozambique. I'm a lecturer in a public university there. And I have a question to the entire panel, but maybe Ms. Nancy would help with the answer. So my question is, in a context where global powers are all into controlling the mineral supply chains, but we have small countries like Mozambique, DRC, and Zimbabwe, which are rich but are weak. We risk to find ourselves in a dependency situation. So my question is, what kind of regional and international partnerships these small countries could adopt to help them to leverage mineral resources without falling into dependency? Thank you.
So I'm a student. My name is Ansh. My question is not directed to a particular person, but to everyone on the panel. Mr. Mads briefly spoke about President Trump's actions recently with respect to Japan's bilateral agreement. But so we have panelists from India, Greece, Africa, and even Arctic. So how are President Trump's tariffs and other such actions actually affecting maritime trade as a whole in your specific regions? Thank you.
Good afternoon, panelists. My name is Abhimanyu Amarkant. I am a final year student of political science. And my question was to Miss Nancy that historically we've seen that Africa has always been a hub of opportunities, not just for African countries, but also for European powers seeking to exploit Africa for its mineral resources. But today we see that, as you said, it opens up a floor of opportunities, not just for Africa, but also for European powers, for the big superpowers of the P5, the non-state actors as well, all looking to militarize trade routes as well as threaten the sovereignty and security of the mineral resources and global supply chain. So how is the African Union looking to collectively address this problem and prevent maybe a second scramble of Africa when it comes to rare earth and critical minerals?
Good morning. A quick question. How do we ensure that the new supply chains for the critical minerals remain equitable, especially for producers in the global south? Thank you.
My name is Vidya. I work as an associate professor at IIT Jodhpur. I have a quick question. So this constant conflict between the global north and the global south, so the difficult space to negotiate. So like we heard, not in my backyard, but it should also be not in anybody's backyard. So how do we negotiate spaces like that? Because it's a shared planet and it's a shared responsibility, like all of us would agree. So it's a difficult, there are no straightforward solutions, but what does a panel think?
So let me start from maths and let me go like this. And this is also your opportunity to make your concluding remarks. So please pick questions that you feel like.
And very good questions, and I will be very quick. The first one with Mozambique and partners. Look at a place like Greenland. Greenland is 56,000 people, so a small country in many ways. They have a lot of minerals, and they decided to do a strategic partnership with the European Union. So my advice is, if you're a small country, pick who you are deciding to do business with. You know, who is most reliable, who is most trustworthy, not necessarily who gives you the best deal in the short term, but who gives you the best deal in the long term. That goes for energy as well as critical raw materials. President Trump, I think the biggest impact to shipping, of course, tariffs is poison for companies. Everyone knows this, especially small open economies. But what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, last week with the IMO and the blocking of the green shipping development, that was thanks to President Trump. And that will have a big impact on shipping. And the emissions from shipping has an impact in the Arctic, but also an impact in the global south. And finally, just to conclude, and the final two questions, how do we make sure, which I think is very much, how do we make sure that we're not just using the global south as a backyard for the dirty processing? How do we make sure that there is win-win situation? I think a lot of it comes back to consumers has to be willing to pay more up in the west, in the north. Consumers has to be willing to pay more. That as well is governments. But that also comes, if you pay more, you also expect something back again. So that takes regulation and a system, a clear framework condition, societies that are easy and trustworthy to do business with, transparent business methods, and so on. So you can have a win-win where all the money is actually put where the minerals are, as long as they're transparent business methods, because customers are willing to pay more especially right now, but it's just difficult to find those partners. But I believe it's possible, but it's hard work.
Thank you. I think I'll just add one more point to the question about Mozambique. Choose your partner, yes, but also your negotiators very well and wisely so that they represent the best of what the country needs alongside with the people. Then the issue of the second question was Africa being a hub of opportunities and what we are looking to do. Under the framework of the African Union, Africa is working with other willing partners. I may cite for an example the Africa-Europe Foundation, where we are working together to rewrite collaboration, not in terms of donations or aid, but in terms of having an equal platform for development and sharing in a transparent manner. I think that will help in this race trying to militarize, and also working in collaboration with partners in order to realize what is in it for us and not just, bringing it down, as it were, to the weaker countries. I think that's what I would want to add. Thank you.
Constantinos?
Yes, my point would be that at this point, there is a big overlap of bilateral initiatives, of regional initiatives. I think that at the end of the day, and maybe the timing is not right, but the timing is never right for these kind of things, we should start an international dialogue, a multilateral dialogue about what should be done. And the same thing happened also with climate change. There is a backlash even within the discussion about climate change, but if we don't bring all players on board, if we don't have all the countries in the same table, we will continue having the same discussion again and again. And especially about Africa and the global south, for me, the most important word is ownership. Not only ownership of the resources, but also ownership of any decision that is being taken, and the people should be involved. The people should be part of all these discussions, and the empowerment, let's say, of the African Union will allow Africa to have also a stronger role in the discussion. So yes, choose your negotiator, choose your partner, but do also the homework in order to have a stronger voice. And at the end of the day, yes, we should all sit on the same table. It has been said many times before. We have only one planet. At the end of the day, we should realize it. If not, it will be too late. Hopefully not. I will stop with a positive remark.
I think the first realization should be when one person develops, the rest of the world also develops. I think that realization, the moment it sets in, will go a long way. We should realize that when we are sitting across our table, there is no small nation, there is no big nation. We are partners, and when we say collaborate, it should be in the literal sense of the word collaborate. When we say, okay, I give you this, you in turn give me that, I think the consideration also should be equal. The consideration cannot be big for somebody, cannot be small for somebody. When we enter into a partnership, I think these are all points we will have to keep in mind, whether the other person respects our sovereignty, whether the other person is able to sit across with us as an equal, not as one step above, not as one step below, but as an equal. And these are basics, very basics for any multilateral or bilateral agreement to actually be fulfilled to its last word. So with these things, I think we should be able to have more stable partnerships. We should be able to have more equitable distribution of resources. And yes, one of the speakers put it very nicely. Somebody has to pay for all this. So the pay need not be, is not necessarily, I would say, is not a penalty, but a pay in the sense that to look at things in the long run, to ensure that our environment, our social and political interests are protected. So with all these considerations, I think a very reasonable pay for all the needs are there. So with this, again, one question was the impact on maritime trade. There is a lot of impact. We are seeing it. There is a lot of fluctuation in cargo. The cargoes are sometimes not coming up. Sometimes the cargo is there, but the demand has gone down. So fluctuations are there. But I think the ability of the trade is to take up these fluctuations and they realign themselves. The way we reroute our cargo, reroute our ships, we keep realigning ourselves. I think in the same applies to this critical mineral sector. There might be some turbulences, but I think we have the ability to realign ourselves and bring that partnership to a more sustainable and fruitful outcome. I think that is completely possible.
Thank you very much. On that optimistic note, it's good to end a panel that when we started, we were talking about challenges, and when we ended, I think all the panelists were largely on the same page. The challenges are very similar across geographies as we heard them speak, and I think the opportunities also are enormous if we can develop the kind of frameworks that we have been talking about this hour or so. So with that, let me hand it over back to Pulkit.